Shabbat Shalom. Do you realize that you could be a number of places, and yet the King of all creation has set a time aside to meet with you? That's mind-staggering to me. I tell you, every single time they sing that song, what comes to my mind, I'm reminded of the fact that every single Shabbat, every single feast that we enter into, you have an opportunity to see the transfigured word. You have an opportunity to handle the one that spoke you and created you. Amen? I'm reminded of Adam. After the fall, when he's removed from the garden, after he had walked with the voice, and access is denied, I believe the hope that Adam had was he understood and knew that there were these Moedim, there was these divine appointments, these cycles that he could walk in. And every Shabbat, every Shavuot, every divine appointment, there was an opportunity for him to once again see the voice, for him to walk with the voice. And so I believe that made it bearable for Adam, knowing and understanding there would be a day that he would be restored to handle and walk with and be unified with that voice. Amen? And so for me, Shabbat, Shavuot, it's not something that's just, it's mundane, this is what we do, but my goodness, this is an opportunity to walk with the voice, to hear the voice. You have access back to Eden that is cut off and denied outside of these gateways of the Moedim. Isn't that powerful? Over the last several weeks, all the way from Passover leading up to Shavuot, we've been sharing and teaching. We've been talking about the season that we are just now coming out of, the season of the Sephirot HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. And from the very beginning, we continued to say, each and every one of us, my goodness, it seemed like there was something different about this season. There was something that Yahweh was revealing and something that he was doing that is different than all of the other cycles we have walked through. And how many realize that you're here today because of where you've been, because of what he's brought you through? And I believe this Shavuot is not only building upon this 50 days that we've just come out of, but it's building upon all the previous Shavuots and cycles that we've been through, each one teaching you, each one transforming you, each one bringing you to this day right now that you could stand before him and be prepared to enter into this door in a manner that you never have before. Amen? Shavuot, as Pastor David was already referring to, is a powerful feast on the cycle of Yahweh. And I'll have to say, looking at it this year, I began to look at it differently because you'll see that there's something about Shavuot that's unique. It literally stands center in the festival cycle. And it's the season and the feast of transition. Shavuot decided and sealed the fate of an entire generation that stood at Sinai. The decision they made at Shavuot determined whether they accessed what Yahweh had for them. And so now as we begin to approach, we're here. My goodness, hopefully we've spent the 50 days like we were supposed to. Because now we're here at Shavuot. And once again, that pattern, that sets the precedent. It will decide the fate of your future. It will decide the fate of an entire generation, and it will direct the course of not only your life, but the life of the generations to come. Shavuot is important. And so in lieu of the normal Torah portion, we're going to focus on Shavuot. And as we've said, it seems as if this entire season there's been this sense of anticipation that's been building, sensing Yahweh's about to do something. He's about to move and do something among his people that I believe we haven't seen since Yeshua bodily walked the earth. And for 50 days, for 7 weeks, he gives you a season to prepare for this. This isn't something you just arrive at and step into, okay, I'm ready, I want this. He gives you a season of preparation because he understands this is a mantle that you're about to take on that is going to require you to walk as a mature son and daughter. And in fact, when you look at the entire cycle of the feasts, you'll find that Shavuot is the 4th of the 7 yearly holy convocations. And it was really interesting to me because when you begin to look at his calendar, at the feast cycle, these 7 Moedim, they literally form a menorah. Shavuot, though, is the center. It's the central focus. The other 3 on either side point to Shavuot. The center candle traditionally is referred to as the shamash, or the servant candle, and it's the light that lights all others. And when we begin to look at this, my goodness, wait a minute, that means that the role of Shavuot, something about Shavuot, is going to illuminate and light all the other feasts, my understanding and how I walk through them. Do you realize that it seems to be pointing towards the fact that Shavuot, whatever we do, how we arrive at Shavuot, how we handle Shavuot, our understanding of it, will determine what takes place at the earlier spring feast, looking back at Passover, unleavened bread, and Yom HaBikurim. In other words, what I do at Shavuot now goes back in time and says, this is what you were set free from at Passover. This is what you were delivered from. Shavuot now goes back and says, this is what was cut off. It also reaches forward and it begins to affect what we anticipate to happen at the fall feasts, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. It determines what you're headed towards. And so now as we begin to look at this, it seems that all of this is dependent upon how we enter Shavuot, which now is going to illuminate and light the entire festival cycle. My goodness, Shavuot's important. In fact, when we begin to look at this, the pattern revealed, when we look at Israel, when they're brought out of Egypt, we know that they're redeemed at Passover. They exit Egypt. They cross the Red Sea at Yom HaBikurim. This becomes the pattern. They enter into the wilderness for the 50-day season of the Sefirat HaOmer, all in order to arrive at a set destination at Mount Sinai at Shavuot. They arrive at Sinai, and we find this pattern that's revealed in what Israel begins to walk out. It's setting the foundation and the significance for what it means for you to arrive at this divine appointment. How many realize that Shavuot signifies, from Passover to Shavuot, it's signifying the journey from slave to mature sons and daughters, from death to new life, from the status of bondage to the status of a nation of kings and priests. That's why there's a 50-day interval. Because how many of you realize that when you've been a people that have been enslaved, you've been in bondage, you've been exiled, there are mindsets, there are habits, there are lifestyles that have to be dealt with. Because how many realize that as a mature son or daughter that's charged with walking as a nation of kings and priests, you're expected to handle and make decisions differently than a slave would. And so in order for Israel to now step into this and take on this mantle, Yahweh in his mercy gives them this 50-day cycle to prepare themselves. And we find that whatever they do, when they arrive at Shavuot, when they stand at that threshold at Sinai, then in that moment, they now make the decision, this is what I was delivered from at Passover. And this is also, on the other hand, what I'm choosing to keep, what I'm choosing to walk in. Shavuot becomes literally the threshold that we will step over that decides our fate and the course of this next festival cycle. And we find that with Shavuot being the central focus, could it be then that if we don't undergo this transition, if we don't understand the purpose of renewing our minds, of learning how to walk as these mature sons and daughters, then we'll never fully understand or access the potential and the purpose meant for us at these divine appointments. Because they can only be entered into by one who is walking as sons and daughters that will function as his representatives and literally his co-regent on the earth. These are gateways. Abraham's seed was told that he will possess the gates. Amen? Now, as we continue to look at this, you'll find that the first direct reference to Shavuot is seen in Exodus chapter 34, verse 22. This is when you see the title of this feast. It says, "And thou shalt observe the feast of weeks," Shavuot, "of the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end." When you look at this term weeks, it's where we get the title of this feast, Shavuot. It's Strong's number 7620, Shavuot, and it means 7, a period of 7 or a week, from the root shavah, and it means to swear, to adjure, to take an oath. And when you begin to look at this, you'll find that covenant and oaths are intertwined with the number 7. That's why you keep the 7th day Shabbat. It's an indicator that you walk in covenant with the Most High. You are sevened. You have taken an oath. Oaths we find in the ancient Near Eastern culture, they were confirmed by either 7 sacrifices or by 7 witnesses or pledges. And so when we look at Shavuot, it's the Feast of Weeks because we've counted 7 weeks, and yet the Hebrew goes beyond this, and it's revealing Shavuot is literally the Feast of Oaths. The feast of a covenant that's been cut, that's been witnessed, of a pledge that has been made, of 7 sacrifices that have taken place. We find that Shavuot is the culmination of a 7-week period of time directly connected to the 7ing process required to confirm a covenant that's been entered into. It's the season of the 7 pledges or the 7 witnesses, indicating then that by the time we arrive at Shavuot, we have a new standing. We have new garments because we've entered into a covenant, which also then entails that we now have certain responsibilities as one that will come alongside and be a part of this covenant. Amen? Well, as I began to look at this, it caused me to ask the question, what 7-fold promise, what 7-fold oath did Yahweh make that Shavuot, he's revealing to Israel, it's the culmination of this? Well, when you go back, when he's first revealed to them while they're in Egypt, in bondage, in Exodus chapter 6, verses 6 through 8, Moshe is sent as his representative, and we find that Moshe is given some very detailed instructions of who to present the deliverer, who he is. And we find that when he goes to Israel in their bondage, this is what he's instructed to tell them. He reveals to them the name of Yahweh. It says in Exodus chapter 6, verse 6, "Wherefore say unto the children of Israel, I am Yahweh, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will rid you out of their bondage, and I will redeem you with the stretched out arm and with great judgments. And I will take you to me for a people, and I will be to you your Elohim, and you shall know that I am Yahweh your Elohim, which bringeth you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians." When you begin to break that down, you'll find that that's a 7-fold promise that's directly connected to the revealing of the name of Yahweh. He tells them, I will bring you out, I will deliver you, I will redeem you, I will take you, I will be your Elohim, I will bring you into the land, and I will give it to you for a possession. Amen? How many realize then that when Israel arrived at Shavuot, they understood the covenant that was being cut? They understood that there was a 7-fold promise, that now this was the manifestation of that promise. The moment they stepped at Sinai, entered into this feast, my goodness, this was the season. All of these things were about to be made manifest and seen in their life. Shavuot is to be the manifestation of this 7-fold promise. And when you begin to look at this 7-fold promise, it's quite interesting because all of the points seem to be checked off by the time they arrive to Sinai, except the final 2 regarding the inheritance. He has redeemed them, he's delivered them, he's revealed himself to them, he's now taken them as his people. But as Israel stands at Sinai at Shavuot, they have yet to see the land of their inheritance or possess it. The final 2 points are still waiting when they arrive. Well, the inheritance, the land, was reserved for the firstborn. How many realize that the blessing is reserved for the firstborn of the house? Israel was called when they are delivered out of Egypt, Pharaoh, let Israel go. Israel, my son, even my firstborn. When Israel arrives at Sinai, all of the points have been checked off except for the points that will require them to be presented in that fashion as the firstborn. Do you think perhaps that Israel is expected at this encounter to prove that they are in fact ready and capable of fulfilling this role in order to access these final 2 aspects of the promise? That as they arrive at Sinai, Yahweh is now looking and testing them and inspecting them to see, is this a slave nation that has arrived and is standing before me, or is this the firstborn son, the Bekor? Is this the one capable of entering into the land of the inheritance and possessing it and handling it in a mature and righteous manner? It's interesting to note as well that when we begin to look at this sevenfold promise and its association with this feast cycle, we find that there are layers that are revealed here. When Shavuot is first referenced in Exodus chapter 34, it caught my attention because when you go back and you look, it's bookended between passages regarding first the weekly Sabbath, the seventh day, Shavuot, and then it addresses Sukkot, the seventh festival. Do you think perhaps this focus on the number 7, the seventh day, Shavuot in the 7 weeks, and then the seventh festival is pointing towards a pattern regarding each of these cycles, revealing revelation regarding this sevenfold promise? Do you think that maybe every single week you have an opportunity to experience and walk out this promise, culminating with Shabbat, where now you can present yourself and possess the blessings and the promised word that he's given you? That maybe this is the purpose of the cycles you're walking out. Every single Shabbat, you have an opportunity to arrive and stand before the King. There's a gateway open, and you have a chance to declare, I am your son or your daughter, capable of handling the word that you've given me. And then now we find this is expounded and built upon because then you enter the special season of the Sefirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, 7 weeks. Each week as well then begins to build on this and reveal a piece of this promise culminating at Shavuot, where the fullness of the said promise is seen. And then you overlay it with the entire festival cycle of the 7 Moedim. Every single feast revealing an aspect of the sevenfold promise that reveals who he is. It's directly intertwined and connected with his name. You can't understand Yahweh. You can't understand who he is. You can't understand the authority and the power that's held in his name if you don't understand and walk out this sevenfold promise that he made that reveals his name. We find at Passover, I will bring you out. Unleavened bread, I will deliver you. My goodness, he did those things exactly on those feast days. Yom HaBikurim, I will redeem you. Shavuot, I will take you. Yom Teruah, I will be your Elohim. Yom Kippur, I will bring you into the land. Sukkot, I will give it to you for a possession. Amen? We find that these are the cycles we walk out weekly and yearly, designed to produce mature sons and daughters capable of walking in the authority and the power of the name that promise is attached to. Every single divine appointment and opportunity to be presented before the King of Kings, to show, to literally bring fruit, to bring evidence and show, I'm walking as a mature son or daughter. I'm no longer the slave that you redeemed and brought out of exile and brought out of Egypt. My mind has been renewed, and you have a chance to say, Hineni, send me. We find that this is further emphasized by the Messiah when he reveals to his disciples what to expect at Shavuot. It's amazing to me that after the resurrection, he spends 40 days, almost all of the season of the Sefirat HaOmer with his disciples, revealing things to them and expounding on things, I believe, all in order to prepare them for what was about to happen at Shavuot. But then interestingly enough, there's 10 days that he goes ahead, he ascends, and they're left 10 days waiting before Shavuot, before Pentecost, before the experience in the upper room. Do you think perhaps those final 10 days had something to do with the disciples now being given an opportunity to understand everything that they had been entrusted with and make their decision that come Shavuot, they would be able to stand and say, yes, Hineni? In Luke chapter 24, verse 49, this is what the Messiah tells his disciples. It says, and behold, I send the promise of my Father upon you. But tarry ye in the city of Jerusalem until you be endued with power from on high. Both last week, Shepherd John, and the previous week, we looked at the word power there, and it In the Greek, it's dunamis, literally this dynamite type power, this authority, this restoration of a power upon the people. But today we're going to look at that word promise. I send the promise. The word promise in the Greek, it's Strong's number 1860, epangelia. I probably butchered that word. It means an announcement or a promise. But it's from the root meaning to announce that one is about to do or furnish something. In other words, the promise is previously given. Yeshua makes the statement that they're now going to be furnished. They're going to be filled out. They're going to be made manifest. How many of you have been given a promised word? And yet, you know you've been given that promised word. You know Yahweh told you that. You know He made a covenant with you. He promised you that. But how many of you have not fully seen it yet? And now you can begin to understand, my goodness, what Shavuot is about. Yeshua says, I will send the promise. I will furnish. I will cause it to be made manifest. It will be filled out. Amen? The Septuagint uses this same term 3 times in the Old Testament. It is used to translate the term amar, Strong's number 559 in the Hebrew, to tell or to speak. And it is also connected to the Hebrew term safar, Strong's number 5608, to count, to tell, to declare, and to rehearse. And I thought that was quite interesting because both of these Hebrew terms have a distinct connection to Shavuot. They form a word play with the phrase Sefirat, Safar, HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. Yeshua, when he tells his disciples, I'm going to send the promise, he's directly connecting it back to them to the fact of what you're preparing to exit out of, the Sefirat HaOmer, the season of the counting of the Omer. It has a direct effect on what's about to be made manifest, what's about to be furnished. Amen? In other words, what you've been declaring this past 50 days, count the days. Make the Omer count. Make sure you understand this cycle because what you've been declaring, Yeshua makes a statement, it's about to be made manifest. It's about to be filled out. When you look at this, the term amar, this word for promise in the Greek is directly connected to the Hebrew root amar. It's a cognate of the word omer, the sheaf, the counting of the omer, the counting of the sheaves leading up to Shavuot. But the term amar, meaning to tell or speak, is unique. We've looked at this previously, and that this word amar is used to describe the language of Eden and creation. When you go back in the Hebrew and you begin to look in Genesis chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, you will not see the term debar, the promised word. You will see the word amar. Amar, this form of speaking is the language of Eden and creation. It's the word that immediately is made manifest and the word that creates. Yahweh amar, let there be, and immediately there is. When you now connect amar to safar, you're not told to amar for 50 days, you're told to safar, to rehearse, to declare, to tell, and to count. These two terms together, safar and amar, in the Hebrew have a combined numerical value of 581, and it's the same value as one of the titles of Yahweh, El Tikon, which literally translates as the God of restoration. Amen? Yeshua promised his disciples that if you will be obedient to Safar, if you'll rehearse this, if you'll walk this out, if you'll declare it even though you haven't seen it, then come Shavuot, it will be that same Safaring, that what you've been declaring, it's going to transform and it will become an Amar word. It will cause it to be made manifest, and you will see the manifestation of Yahweh in the form of the God of restoration. In other words, in any capacity, what you've been lacking, what's been stolen from you, what's been taken, the God of restoration will now cause it to be furnished and complete. Amen? Amen? How many of you realize, though, that it's not only about restoring you, as precious as you are, and as much as Yahweh cares about you, it's not only about restoring the areas in your life, but how many of you realize that as he begins to restore these areas in your life, his name is attached to that sevenfold promise, that this is what he would do in your life. So as you're restored, as you walk this out, as this covenant promise is seen in your life, it literally begins to restore the authority of his name. And so for his name's sake, he will ensure that this takes place. Amen? So we have to ask the question, what is the Messiah revealing that is being sent? The promise of the Father. And the promise of the Father is that he will be manifested as the God of restoration. His name will be in good standing, and his name is attached to that sevenfold promise. You will be redeemed. You will be delivered. You will come out. You will possess your inheritance. Amen? And yet the Messiah, at the same time as he's revealing the significance of what's taking place, he's reminding you and the disciples there of their covenant obligation. He's going to reveal himself and appear as El Tikkun, the God of restoration, and yet your covenant responsibility is that you are commanded to safar, to declare, to rehearse, to tell, to count, to walk it out. The manifestation of his name is directly connected to your obedience to safar, to declare this, in order that come this set time, this divine appointment, it will be furnished, it'll be manifested, it'll be created. It's amazing to me because when you begin to look at the patterns here, this is dealing with Israel taking on the mantle and the responsibility of the firstborn, the heir of the promise, the heir of the house that's capable of standing up and managing the affairs of the Father's house. We also find that part of the obligation of the firstborn is there to carry on the name of the Father. And we find that as long as there is an heir, the next generation, the name continues. The name is in good standing. And so we find that the whole reason he's going to redeem and bring back Israel is Israel, all the way back here in Exodus, was referred to as Israel, my son, even my firstborn. His name is literally attached to you. This is why you're brought out of exile. Your restoration is literally for his name's sake. In Isaiah chapter 48, he goes on to describe Israel, you've been stubborn, you've been hard-hearted, you haven't listened, you've neglected it, but for my name's sake, you'll be restored. For my name's sake, you'll be brought back. Amen? As we continue to look at this, we find that safar means to relate, to rehearse, to declare, to speak or utter words. And when you begin to look at the nuanced meaning of this word, it's in the sense of the communication of important information and truths. This is what you've been challenged with. This season leading up to Shavuot, you've been challenged with understanding, communicating, rehearsing, and revealing an important truth that's been spoken to you. We find that the term safar also describes a scribe, a learned man, or a muster officer, and its cognate of other terms means a book or a scroll. And it seems to indicate that the one in the office of a scribe or a learned individual has the ability to read, to understand, to communicate, and declare the important information that was contained within the scroll. Do you think that perhaps the season of the Sefirat HaOmer is a season where you're given an opportunity to be trained to safar? You rehearse. You continually speak forth and release the promised word that was revealed to you. And you're given a season that you're challenged to spend the time understanding that word intimately, to learn it, to know every aspect of that promised word you were given, to learn to communicate it, to declare it forth, all the while there is no evidence yet seen or manifested regarding it. A lot of times we get excited when we receive a promised word from Yahweh, right? But in the time it takes for that promised word to be made manifest, it becomes less exciting. In fact, a lot of times we'll take that word because it's been so long that we've been walking this out, and we'll put that word on the shelf. And there are seasons where we forget about that word. And when that word's put on the shelf, we no longer declare that word. We don't understand that word. We're not spending the time to intimately understand and know that word. And yet we have the audacity, at times we've all been there, to stand before him and say, where is the manifestation of that promise? And yet the light begins to turn around and shine on us. Do you even understand that promise? Are you even ready and capable of handling that promise? This is the season of the Sefirat HaOmer. Even when you don't see it, even when it's not furnished or manifested, you're obedient to continue to declare it, to understand it, to be intimate with it, to not forget what was spoken to you. And this literally, I believe, becomes the test that separates the slave mentality from his sons and daughters. Amen? We find that Safar is first seen in Genesis chapter 15, verse 5. It's in regards to what Abraham is told. It says, "And he brought him forth abroad and said, Look now toward heaven and tell Safar the stars, if thou be able to number to Safar them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be." And when you look at this from the English, we walk away with the concept that Abraham is told to count the physical number of stars. And if he is that good of a mathematician, if he can count the physical number of stars, then he's going to have, that's how many of his lineage that there's going to be. But that's not what's being said in the Hebrew. Literally, the salvation message of the Torah was written in the stars, in the luminaries. Abraham was told, go outside, you read that message. Do you understand the message, Abraham? If you understand it and you're willing in turn to declare it, even though you don't see it, if you're willing to declare the message that's been written in the heavenlies, so shall your seed be. Amen? In other words, his generations to come beyond what Abraham could see would be redeemed and restored regardless of what it looked like from the natural. At this point in time, Abraham doesn't even have an heir. And yet he's told, outside of what it looks like from the natural, your entire house, your name is going to be redeemed and restored. Do you think perhaps the same has been expected of you and I? The season leading up to Shavuot distinguishes those who have been obedient to rehearse and declare in faith the promise of his word in our lives. And now at Shavuot, we find the pattern is revealed that those promises, he's made a covenant oath, they're going to be made manifest and furnished. The same word that you've been obedient to learn of, to understand, at Shavuot, there's a transition that takes place. You've been safaring it, you've been reading it, you've been declaring it, you've been rehearsing it, but at Shavuot, now it becomes an Amar word. It literally becomes a word with the ability to create and be released. And as that word is released, El Tikkun, the God of restoration, is made manifest, and he furnishes that promised word. Amen? Now back to Exodus chapter 34, verse 22, when he begins to first reveal Shavuot, it says, "And thou shalt observe the Feast of Weeks." And then he goes on to give a little bit more description of what this Feast of Weeks is, of the first fruits of the wheat harvest. The word first fruits, it's Strong's number 1061, bikur. It means first fruits. It's from the root, though, Strong's number 1069, bakar, and it means to be born first, to have the birthright. Directly connected to the rights and privileges of the firstborn. The inheritance and the blessing belong to the firstborn, not because, oh, you're the favorite, you're the firstborn, but because they had the responsibility on their shoulders to make sure that the house and the lineage and the name continued on. And now you can begin to understand when he's telling Israel, I have an inheritance for you. I'm going to bless you with this land. Along with that blessing, along with that authority, along with that inheritance came a responsibility. They were responsible to care for, to keep, and to guard that land and to keep that covenant. When we look at this, it's quite interesting because the term first fruits, bikur, it has a numerical value of 228, and it's the same value as the Hebrew phrase etz chaim, the tree of life. We have to ask, wait a minute, what is this revealing about Shavuot? The English tells us, oh, it's the first fruits of the wheat harvest. And from the natural, that's what's taking place. It's the season of the wheat harvest. But the Hebrew begins to reveal that it's the season of the firstborn, the heir, the one that is capable of handling the responsibility, accessing something, walking into and through a doorway with something that has to do with accessing the tree of life, the Etz Chaim. Let's look at the word for harvest. It's the first fruit of the wheat harvest. It's Strong's number 7105, katsir, and it means harvest or harvesting, but it also refers to branches. It's used in Job to refer to a fresh sprig springing forth from a stump, and it's used in an analogy that it's an indication of life. In other words, something that seemed as if it was cut off, it was dead, it can't produce fruit, it has no life. All of a sudden, there's evidence. Wait a minute, this is still alive. There's life here. We find that the Torah begins to reveal just within these few words both the significance of Shavuot as well as what was expected of Israel when arriving at Sinai. When we arrive at Shavuot, you and I are expected to present an indication of life. Having been considered enslaved, exiled, and dead, after walking out this 50-day cycle, Yahweh now waits for the Bikor, the firstborn, Israel, the one capable of handling the covenant responsibilities and the inheritance promise to stand up and present himself. And when this happens, I believe it reveals that access will be restored to the Etz Chaim, a restored status lost from Adam. How many of you realize that just as Israel, the same pattern, they were exiled in Egypt, considered dead and lost, cut off, no life. They're expected now to stand before him at Sinai and present, we are alive, we are living. There's still life in these bones. Well, how many of you realize that the same analogy is used of you? In Exodus chapter 37, we, the exiled house of Israel, are described as those dry, dead bones with no life in them. And yet he makes a promise that he's going to begin to breathe upon those bones, and he's waiting and expecting those bones to stand up and declare, there is life here. Amen? This same test, waiting to see if life is still found there, it's interesting because you see it paralleled in regards to the rebellion against Moses and Aaron that was led by Korah. In Numbers chapter 17, after this massive rebellion regarding who has the right to lead Israel, who has the right to wear the mantle of the priesthood, which, by the way, all of those are significant and specifically attached to the role of the firstborn, the Bikor. That's why it should have been all of Israel as a nation of kings and priests, because they were called his firstborn. But we find that because Israel rejected it, Levi is now walking in this stead. Well, in the midst of the rebellion, questioning who has the right to access this, in Numbers chapter 17, we find that all of Israel, each tribe is commanded to take a rod and to lay it and present it literally before Yahweh in the Holy of Holies, before the ark. And we find as the final proof, the rod, the branch, is taken from each tribe, presented before him, but only one rod is capable of presenting proof of life. Aaron's. In Numbers chapter 17, verse 8, it says, and it came to pass that on the morrow Moshe went into the tabernacle of witness, and behold, the rod of Aaron for the house of Levi was budded, and brought forth buds, and bloomed blossoms, and yielded almonds. It produced fruit when it stood before Yahweh, indicating there was still life here. We find that for a season, this gave Levi the mantle of the priesthood, while the rest of Israel from this test was incapable of presenting a living son. Their branches had no life in them. In turn, they're exiled from the place of intimacy, literally the Holy of Holies. Yet Isaiah chapter 27 verse 6 makes a promise. It says, he shall cause them that come of Jacob to take root. Israel shall blossom and bud and fill the face of the world with fruit. And it's quite interesting because in the Hebrew, it's the exact same wording as Aaron's rod, what took place. In other words, he's letting them know, for those that have ears to hear, Israel, you will live again. A living heir will be presented and restored. And at the set time when you stand before him, you'll be able to present and say, I'm alive. Amen? the word that's used here for world, in fact, it says that they will bloom, they'll blossom, they'll bud, and the face of the whole world will be filled with fruit. The term for world here in the Hebrew is Strong's number 8398, tevel, translated as world, but it was quite interesting because it's from the root yabal. And it means to bring, to lead, to carry, to flow. But that term yabal is the same root of the word jubilee, the yovel. Every 50th year, there was a jubilee, there was a yovel. The jubilee was the season of the restoration of the inheritance. The jubilee was the season where if you had been exiled, if you had been in bondage, if you had been enslaved, you're set free. Shavuot, every single year on the feast cycle, becomes a mini yovel. It's a season of restoration, a season when you have a chance to declare, I'm living, I have access to my inheritance. Amen? When you look at this root yaval, it carries the sense of something about to be produced or born. In other words, there's about to be new life. The basic meaning indicates to transfer something from one place to another. In other words, whenever there's life that is now steps on the scene and they're presented and they claim and they have proof, I'm living and I'm the heir, yaval indicates that now that inheritance has been over here and it's been held over here and you haven't had access. That doorway's now open and it's transferred to the one that it rightfully belongs to. Amen? It indicates at the yovel that there's a gateway, there's a doorway that's been opened and something's about to come forth. Something's about to be produced. Something's about to be born. We find that when Israel blossoms, when they are able to declare and present that they are in fact living and have proof of it, there's a promised jubilee. There's a restoration of the inheritance, and there's a time of setting free and release. It seems to indicate a spiritual gateway or doorway is open to release the blessings of Yahweh and to see his presence manifested as the sons and daughters are restored. And it's amazing to me because the focus is on the fact that you're being restored into your position of his son and daughter who has access to your inheritance, to the blessings and the promises. But at the same time that's taking place, he's reminding you that the whole reason you're restored and put here is because you've got a job to do. How many realize that Romans chapter 8, verse 19, all of creation is waiting, groaning, waiting for their restoration and to be set free because that's dependent on you. They're waiting for the mature, we are sons, is what it is used in the Greek, to stand up and be seen on the earth. Amen? Now, when presented with this choice at Sinai, I believe Israel fully understood the pattern that when they arrived at Sinai, what was expected of them? He gave them 50 days to be able that when they arrived at Sinai to present proof of life. They had been seen as dead, exiled, contaminated by death, and cut off. They're given a 50-day cycle. He brings them into the wilderness, literally the midbar, the place where the word is speaking, in order to begin to cultivate life within these bones again. And come Shavuot, he expects them to stand there and present the heir, to present themselves as living, redeemed, firstborn sons of Israel. And yet, when Israel gets to Sinai, Israel sends Moshe alone and removes themselves. When it's time to come up the mount and Yahweh begins to speak to them, they're willing to declare all that you've said we'll do, but we're not about to walk up and present ourselves. We'll send Moshe. You talk to him, he can talk to us, and we're good. And we find that the moment they refuse to present proof, in turn, rather than having restored, granted access to the Etz Chaim, the tree of life, to a restored status that Adam had walked in, Moshe instead is given 2 tablets of stone. In Exodus chapter 24, verse 12, it says, And Yahweh said unto Moshe, Come up to me in the mount, and be there. And I will give thee tables of stone and a law and commandments which I have written, that thou mayest teach them. Let's look at what Moshe is given. The term tablets or tables, it's Strong's number 3871, luach. and it means a board, a slab, or a tablet, or a plank. But it's interesting because the two-letter root, the lamed ket, indicates green, fresh, new, as well as vigor, strength, or the spark of life. Remember, Israel was expected to present life. They failed to do so. Moshe, in turn, is giving these tablets of stone. Literally, it seems as if the Hebrews are already hinting at there's a remedy that's being offered. Israel is still seen in the capacity of one that is dead and has no life in them. So now he's going to give them something that will cause a spark of life and strength if they'll accept it. So look at the word stone. They're tablets of stone. Strong's number 68. In the Hebrew, it's the word eben, stone. But when you look at it, it is written Aleph, Beit, Nun. The Aleph prefix means I will, and the Beit, Nun forms the two-letter root meaning son. I will son you. I will make you into an Eben, a living, strengthened son that has the vigor of life flowing through him. Amen? We find that Israel at Sinai is incapable of presenting a living son to claim the inheritance. That's why that generation doesn't go into the promised land. They cannot prove that they're alive. They cannot prove that they have life in them or access to the promises. That generation is cut off. They refuse to take on the role of the firstborn, but in order to make sure that his name is literally attached to the redemption. His name is attached to this restoration. And so we find that there are times that Yahweh considers just cutting them all off, but wait a minute, you made a covenant promise and your name's attached to it. Israel has to be restored. Israel has to be redeemed. The next generation is raised up, and we find that Yahweh's already given them the remedy. They're given the Torah written on tablets of stone. That if they will walk within the boundary lines created by this, it seems to infer that there can be a spark of life that can now bring life to these bones. And I believe it simultaneously, these tablets of stone revealed the Son of life, the Messiah, who would literally become the Word made flesh in order to restore your inheritance and access, and who then would be the one that would light that same spark in you. Amen? Do you think that this is perhaps why Shavuot, that at Shavuot fire is always seen? Because it's that spark of life that's being revealed. Fire was on the mountain. They met the living Elohim. He was waiting to see fire down below. And they say, Moshe, you go. Moses comes back illuminated. His face is lit up. In the upper room, once the promise comes, there's fire seen, cloven tongues of fire seen upon the disciples. I was reminded of Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 33, where he begins to speak that in the past he gave you a covenant written on tablets of stone, which you broke, but there's coming a season, and I believe it directly deals with Shavuot, when he will write it on the tablets of your heart. Literally, he's going to take that fire, that spark, and he's going to stick it in you, and you become lit up, and the fire is lit again. Amen? We find, I believe it's Jeremiah who also says that he likens the word unto a fire shut up in his bones. He understood what it meant to be able to stand and say, I'm a living son. Amen? As we already said it, this as well reveals the garment that you and I can put on. Literally, the Torah that was given to Israel became a garment that if they would walk in this, if they would remain in this garment that's been presented to them within the boundary line set by the Torah, if they would be obedient to Sepharit, to take the Torah that was given to them, declare it, rehearse it, and understand its message, then just like Abraham was told, so shall their seed be. The same message of redemption, life, the Etz Chaim, they could be renewed, strengthened, and considered living as long as they would be obedient to do so. Amen? Now, as we continue to look at this Shavuot, we understand that Shavuot is both a culmination and a fulfillment of the entire sevenfold promise that was given before Israel exits Egypt when the name of Yahweh is revealed. But when you look at it in the bigger picture, Shavuot is also specifically connected and highlights the fourth aspect of this sevenfold promise. The fourth aspect was, I will take you to me for a people. This is what takes place at Shavuot. Let's look at the word for take. I will take you to me. The word take, it's in the Hebrew, it's Strong's number 3947, lakah, and it means to take, to get, to fetch, lay hold of, acquire, and it even has the connotation of to marry or to take as a wife. Shavuot was literally the betrothal ceremony when Israel was being taken as the bride of Mashiach and to be presented before the Adam, Mashiach, on the mountain. But lakah also can mean to take possession of and to occupy. I will take you to me for a people because you're being charged to take possession of something and to occupy it. This term lakah is first seen in Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. It says, and Yahweh Elohim took lakah, the man, Adam, and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. It seems once again to point towards Shavuot being the season where we are taken, lakah, as his people for the same purpose, to have restored access to Eden, literally to the Etz Chaim. And yet at the same time, he's revealing that this door is being opened for you to have access to this place of intimacy, to this doorway that will lead you directly back to Eden. He reminds you that you're being allowed to walk through this door in order to lakah, to take possession of and to occupy this place in order to dress it and to keep it. Revealing there's a responsibility on our part, just like Adam, in regards to the promised word that you've been given. Well, let's look closer at this word Eden. He took man and he put him in the Garden of Eden. Eden in Hebrew, it's Strong's number 5731, and it's translated as meaning pleasure or delight. But when you break it apart, you have the letter ayin, dalet nun. The letter ayin means to see, to understand. It can also represent a well or a fountain, inferring the source of something. It's attached to the dalet nun root, which means to judge, to rule, to regulate, or to defend the rights of someone, even causing one to obtain their rights. And now when you begin to look at Eden, not only is it the place of pleasure and delight where everything is perfect, where Yahweh walks among his people, the voice is seen walking, but Eden literally is functioning as the divine throne room, and it's the source from which you see your rights obtained and defended. In other words, if Shavuot restores your access to Eden, it's restoring your standing. It's defending your position as one who has the right to declare the promises of the word of Yahweh and see them made manifest not only in your life, but in the life of your future generations. To see the jubilee of everything that the enemy has stolen and choked off. Once you access this doorway and you're here, your rights are defended. You're proving, I have access to see this in my life. Amen? And now you can begin to understand that when Adam is exiled from the garden, when he is exiled from Eden, he does so in the position of one who has no ability to declare or defend his rights. He's exiled in the place and in the status of one who is a slave, one who's in bondage. And yet I believe Adam understood the cycles of these feasts. He had already been taught. The Moedim were placed, the lights were placed in the heavenlies, showing him for signs and for seasons for the Moedim. I believe that he understood the cycles of these Moedim were so significant because this was how he was going to be restored. If he wanted to have access back to the authority and the mantle that Yahweh had called him to, he had to learn to walk out these feasts. And we find that only a living son or daughter can walk here. One who has presented the proof of life when requested at Shavuot. Now, as we continue to look at this, the numerical value of lakah, to take, at Shavuot, I will take you to me for a people. It has a numerical value of 138. It's the same as the Hebrew word napah, Strong's number 5301, and it means to breathe, to blow, to cause, to breathe. It's first seen in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, and Yahweh Elohim formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed napah into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. It's interesting to me because this same term is also used in Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 9. Then said he unto me, prophesy unto the wind, prophesy, son of man, and say to the wind, thus saith Yahweh Elohim, come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe, napah, upon these slain, that they may live. It seems to indicate and connect the significance of this divine appointment. It has to do with the restoration, a jubilee. And this jubilee is for the scattered, dry, dead bones of Israel that have been in exile, that have been tainted by death, and yet there's a promise directly connected to his name that they will be breathed into again, just like Adam was, in order to become a living soul. We find that the sages reveal, though, that a better translation of the Hebrew here, that Adam became a living soul in Genesis 2:7, is that he became a speaking soul. How can you present proof that you're a son or daughter unless you have the ability to speak, to declare the word consistently, to rehearse it, to communicate it, to reveal it? Once Adam was breathed into, he became a speaking soul, proving that he was operating in this place and the stead of sonship. The dry bones are being breathed into for the same purpose. We find there's a direct connection between Shavuot and the ability to breathe and release life into something that's been exiled, cut off, and dead. Yet it seems the focus is revealing that this is the responsibility of Adam. It's yours and I responsibility to speak and release it. Just like Abraham was charged with, so shall your seed be. We find that Passover focuses on the actions of Yahweh to redeem and deliver his people, but Shavuot shifts gears. Shavuot is different. At Passover, Yahweh comes into your home. Yahweh chooses to take one that's been bound in their bondage. They have that slave mentality. They don't even know that it can be better. And he takes them and he redeems them and he brings them out. And he carefully brings them into a place where they can hear the word spoken over them. But come Shavuot, the focus begins to shift and change. Shavuot focuses on the responsibility that we've been entrusted with. We've been entrusted with being one that would obediently declare and release the word. And we find that to step through this door, to access this power, this dunamis, the power that he promises at Shavuot, this restored status that Adam initially walked in, we must understand our position as a living, speaking soul, because you're charged with literally declaring and calling it forth. Now, looking closer at the root word for Shavuot, Shavah, an oath, it's formed with the same letters as the Hebrew word Esev, which is translated as meaning herb, grass, or green plants. In fact, the plural of Esev in Hebrew, it's Isuvot, which is literally the exact same letters rearranged that form Shavuot. I thought this was quite interesting because there's a relationship that's revealed throughout the beginnings of Genesis regarding Adam and the herbs, the Esev. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 29, Adam is told that the Esev, the herb, is given to him for meat prior to the fall. And once again, it's emphasized after the fall. In Genesis 3:8-10, once again, Adam's told, the herb is meat for you. Do you think the door to restoration is being revealed to Adam in this statement? Because it's not just the Esev, the herb, but it's literally encoded here is the word Shavuot. Yahweh is emphasizing Adam's responsibility in connection to Shavuot. Remember, Israel's given the tablets of stone, the luach even. The two-letter root of luach also meant green, fresh. I believe it was connecting them directly back to what Adam was first told. This is given to you for meat. But what's quite interesting is how many of you realize that Adam's body and his physical makeup was different prior to the fall than it was after? How do you think he knew? Something's happened. Something changed. He went from one that was designed and able to walk in the presence of Yahweh, who had no death working in him, that now was bound by the limits of time, that was bound by death working in his members. And yet he's told the same thing that was going to feed you prior will feed you now. It will be meat for you. Do you think it was more than dealing with a physical sustenance or food? Something is being revealed here. He's told that the herb is meat for him. Meat is Strong's number 402, akla, and it's translated as food, but it's from the root word akal, and it means to eat, to devour, to burn up, or consume. It carries with it the idea of to lay claim to space. Could it be revealing that Adam must understand his responsibilities literally to lay claim to the esev, to lay claim to the shavah, the oath, the Shavuot? He's charged with both prior to the fall and once again after. He's pointed right back to it, seeming to infer you didn't fully understand the responsibility that you were given. You didn't understand what it meant to present yourself fully as the son at Shavuot. Adam, your doorway back is once again Shavuot. There's something about Shavuot that's unique. It's different. In fact, speaking of the creation account, there's another connection that's seen between Adam and the herb, the Esev. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 5, it's the generations of creation, toldot of the creation account. And here in verse 5, it says, "And every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb, every Esev of the field before it grew. For Yahweh Elohim had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground." The Esev, the herb, code for Shavuot, the Jubilee, the restoration of the covenant promises, here in Genesis 2, verse 5, we're told was waiting for Adam. It was waiting because he must till the ground. All of the other feasts deal with what Yahweh does on behalf of his people, but Adam was given clear instructions. Shavuot waits and depends on you. Adam must till the ground. The word for till here, it's Strong's number 5647, avad, and it means to work, to serve, to worship. It describes the priestly duties or work. Adam must understand what it means to walk as a king and priest in order to access Shavuot. This door is closed for any outside of that. And we find that as a king and a priest, one that would access this doorway, Adam immediately after he's created, how many realize that he immediately begins to declare? He begins to release the word and see it created, and he begins to name all of creation. And so it seems as if he's got it. He's doing it. He's functioning as the son, as the king and priest upon the earth. But yet there's another responsibility that's attached with this, because when you look at avad and you break it apart, you have the letter ayin, and it means to see, to understand, to discern. The ayin beit root means a threshold. The beit dalet root means to separate. He's charged with not only declaring and releasing that word that's been placed within him, but he's also charged with standing at the threshold and separating, distinguishing that which brings forth life and stopping that which brings forth desolation. We find that in this regard, Adam didn't quite understand the responsibility because desolation made its way in. And so now, after this, what is he told directly upon the fall? Once again, Shavuot, Esev, the herb is meat for you. It's waiting on you to access this doorway. This is the source of your standing, your authority. In fact, it's amazing to me because Eden, the first two-letter root forms ayin dalet ad. It means a witness or a testimony. You're called to be a walking testimony. You're called to be a walking witness regarding the covenant promises. And as you walk this out, you literally are wearing and declaring and proving the status and the authority of his name that's attached to those covenant promises. What you safar, what you declare and release, a promise has been made. It will be manifested at Shavuot. So may this be the year that collectively the exiled of Israel are able to stand and call forth the Yovel. We see a glimpse of this in Acts chapter 2. Tongues of fire were seen sitting upon the disciples. When you look at that in the Greek language, it literally inferred a kingdom was being given. They accessed the kingdom. This is the promise of Shavuot. Your Jubilee, your Yovel, is about having access once again to the kingdom of Yahweh. But he waits and he looks and he watches for those that are able to stand before him and declare, I am a living son or daughter. I am a speaking soul. I have obediently so far declared and released it. And now I understand the moment I cross this threshold, it's going to be made manifested and released. This is our Jubilee. This is our Yovel. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.